Okay, so good afternoon to everyone. Okay, fine. So in this particular session, we do have a kind of objective, or let's say goal. And basically what exactly we are going to do, like we are going to discuss about this medieval India. That's the whole idea, that we are going to discuss about this medieval India. But then we are not going to cover the content of the medieval India. Rather, we have to do a kind of analysis. Analysis as in the analysis of like the PYQs and the syllabus and all these kind of things. Now the point is that why it's required. There's a very simple concept that you have to keep in mind, that the moment you have decided, let's say, what is the basic, basic problem with the preparation that we are mostly facing. What happens, let's say you have decided that you have to go for the history optional. And the moment you have decided, okay, I'll go for this history optional, and then you all know that in history optional, there are 4 areas, right? In fact, we can say 5 areas also. So it's ancient, medieval, modern, world, and then the most dangerous one, that's called as map para area, ठीक है? ये 5 areas होते हैं जिसको आपको cover करना होता है. So what is the first thing you do? Like, let's say you decided history, and then you start reading the content. So you just collect the content from different sources. Maybe you are listening any topper, ठीक है, और कोई सीनियर ने कुछ कहा और फिर आपने एक कंटेंट लिस्ट बनाई, ठीक है, या फिर कुछ लोग टेलीग्राम के वीडियोस भी देखते हैं, ठीक है, उससे सोचते हैं कि जो है उन्हीं वीडियोस से काम चल जाएगा, ठीक है. तो ऐसे भी हैं कि जो आप इस तरीके से तैयारी करते हैं. But then the moment it comes to the content, what is important to be noted here, कि the moment it comes to the content of any particular discipline and subject, I must tell you that by reading the content, you won't be able to, by reading certain books, you won't be able to cover the whole content as such. Because any part of history is concerned, either you talk about ancient or medieval or modern, there is no dearth of content. There are n number of books. There are n number of dimensions also for every topic. So when it comes to all these things, in that case, how to cover the syllabus in a limited period of time, that's the most important question. Because here nobody is here to become the master of the subject. And if you are really thinking in this way that you'll try to understand, or if you'll try to, let's say, try to collect this much content that you are going to score very good, it is never going to happen. Because in history precisely, and in fact it is very much applicable to other subjects also, but I must tell you in history precisely, there is no dearth of content. बहुत सारी किताबें, ठीक है, बहुत सारे डायमेंशंस भी है जिसको कवर कर सकते हैं. तो वो सारी चीज़ें हैं जिस पे जो है आप जो वो कॉम्प्लेक्सिटीज़ जो है वो क्रिएट करता है. So what is the best way of understanding any particular portion, either it is ancient, medieval or modern or world, like what is the best way of doing this? So you have to understand ki what is the requirement in UPSC. Like you are not, as I told you, that you are not becoming the, let's say master of the subject. Rather the target is very simply this, that you have to clear UPSC. And if you really wish to become the master of the subject, in that case there is another line. So you should do masters, first graduation and then masters, and then of course MPhil and PhD. So if you really want to become, let's say, a knowledgeable person in that subject, in that case, this is the best way of doing it. But then here, like when it comes to UPSC, you all understand that we have to finish the syllabus max to max in 6 months. And by finishing the syllabus, you have to go for the writing practice and other thing. And that's how, you prepare yourself for this UPSC examination. So basically, this is what called as, either it can be called as the codification of the, or let's say decoding of the syllabus, or let's say understanding the actual requirement of the subject. So that's something which is very important. So in this particular session, what we are going to do, we are going to do the same thing. We'll just understand ki when it comes to medieval India, of course, this we are going to do only with the medieval, like here, we'll be going to cover only medieval India. So the main question is that, like when it comes to the syllabus of the medieval India, which is given to you by UPSC, how to understand that syllabus, and whether whatsoever is written in the syllabus, do you require or do you need to cover everything which is written in the syllabus, or you have to identify certain areas and you need to focus more on them, and you should try to collect more content over them. And of course, like there are certain areas where the concept is also very much required. So as per the nature of topic, you are going to collect the content. That's the main idea. So the same thing we are going to discuss here, like, for the medieval, what is the syllabus given to you by UPSC and how to understand this syllabus, whether every part of syllabus is equally important to you or not. Like these are the things what we will be discussing. But before you come to medieval, let me tell you, the moment it comes to medieval, there are certain things that you have to keep in mind, which is again very important. That just a second. Okay, so when it comes to medieval, right? So how do you understand this medieval? If history is being divided into 4 parts, let's say, what are these 4 parts? Ancient. Then the next part is called as medieval and modern. Specifically, we can say these 3 parts, because the next part is called as modern world. So that's not a kind of specific category in history. That's a different thing. But there are 3 different parts that's called as ancient, medieval, and modern. So when it comes to medieval, just for the sake of keeping a name, it is called as medieval, or there are certain reasons because of it's being called as medieval. सिर्फ नाम के लिए हमने रख दिया कि इसको जो है हमें जो है सलमान बुलाना है, शाहरुख बुलाना है, या कुछ और बुलाना है, या फिर कोई पर्पस है जिसकी वजह से हमने इसको मेडिवल कहा है? व्हाट डू यू थिंक? कुछ भी एक बुलाना था, जैसे लाइक इट शुड बी गिवन ए नेम, सो इट वाज जस्ट गिवन ए नेम कि चलो इसको मेडिवल बुलाएंगे, हमने फॉलो कर लिया उसको कि हम भी मेडिवल बुलाएंगे इसको, ठीक है? This is the purpose, this is how it's being called as medieval, or there's a different reason behind it? क्या रीजन है जिसकी वजह से हम इसको medieval बुलाते हैं? The presence of feudalism. Okay, very nice. और क्या हो सकता है? Why it's being called as medieval, and why it is considered as a different time period? Why it's considered as a different time period? Why is not being studied in the ancient or in modern? Why do we call it medieval only? Rule of the outsiders. But the point is that it's not being called as medieval only in India. It's being called as medieval even in Europe also.
Transition period between ancient and modern.
Okay. Time of great changes, of course. So when it comes to medieval, I must say that it's being called as medieval on the basis of certain changes. So on the basis of these changes, आ जाएगा थोड़ी देर में, ठीक है? On the basis of these changes, we call it medieval. Now, what kind of changes we are talking about, right? So the moment it comes to changes, right, we have to always keep in mind that there are few changes which are known as political, then economic, social, religious, and cultural. These are the various dimensions where we can really talk about the changes. Got it? So when we see that from, like when you travel from ancient to medieval, you then notice that certain changes are there. Like these changes, like in the political domain, you can find certain changes. Even the economy is drastically changing. Or matlab, there is such a change which can be very precisely noticed. And this is the reason because of what we started saying, that there is it's a different period. So you can't read it like as part of ancient, because there are certain features like which have appeared in the society, and these features are different from ancient, and that's why it could not be studied in this way. Now the point is that if I was trying to decode the syllabus, why suddenly I have come to this? Because if you have started understanding the broader character or the nature of any particular period, in that case you'll be able to identify that what are the main thrust while reading that particular portion. So when we have been reading medieval, there are certain questions which should be always kept in mind, and if you are keeping it, like if you are trying to understand the medieval with a broader vision, in that case you'll be able to keep those questions always in your mind, which are very important while understanding the syllabus. That's the simple thing, right? So when it comes to medieval, of course certain changes were there. So while reading medieval, you have to keep all these questions in your mind कि अच्छा ये है जिसको हम medieval कहते हैं, या इसकी वजह से हम इसको medieval कहते हैं. So when you are covering the content, let's let's say you have been reading early medieval, then you have been reading like let's say Sultanate period, or let's say Mughal period. So these broader questions like should be there in your mind. In that case, you'll be able to do more justice. That's the first thing. And the second thing, you'll be also able to understand what kind of question can be framed from this particular part. That's how like it is simplifying your problem. So basically, when you talk about medieval, so these changes could be noticed, and as somebody was suggesting, the broader change that could be noticed in this particular period was feudalism. Sorry. But when it comes to feudalism, whether feudalism is like where exactly you can keep the feudalism, you can keep it here, you can keep it here, here, or somewhere else. कहाँ पे फिट बैठता है फ्यूडलिज्म इन अगर सारी चेंजेस की हम बात करें या सारे डायमेंशंस की बात करें तो आपको कहाँ पे लगता है कि फ्यूडलिज्म सबसे एक्यूरेट बैठता है पॉलिटिकल में, इकोनॉमिक में या फिर कहीं और? Political and economic. So don't you think that feudalism was marking certain changes even in the society and culture also? Everywhere, right? So actually feudalism is such a phenomena that could be noticed in medieval period, which is having which was like having impact like here, and everywhere, right? So you can't say that feudalism precisely is a political system, is is an economic system, or is a social system, or a cultural system, or a religious, like it is indicating towards some sort of religious changes. This is incorrect. Feudalism एक ऐसा system है जिसका change, जिसका impact जो है आप more or less हर जगह पे देखते हैं, and this is the reason because of what like it is like very important to us, and in fact in the background of the feudalism, or let's say the changes which are happening in this period, you have to understand the syllabus of medieval, right? So now when it comes to feudalism, it was, as I'm telling you, that it's a feudalism is basically considered to be a mode of production. It's considered to be a mode of production, and in this particular mode of production, it was as such that it actually got a different kind of polity. And what kind of polity it was? It was a kind of decentralized polity, right? So in the ancient times, we have talked about a different kind, or we have studied a different kind of polity that was a centralized polity. That was all about centralized polity. Ancient में कैसा होता है? Centralized polity क्या होती है? जहाँ पे like the king is controlling everything with the help of bureaucracy. So in bureaucracy is there, like the bureaucracy is helping the king in order to establish his control or exercise control. But then when it comes to feudalism, it's not indicating towards basically, I must say, centralization, rather it is clearly indicating towards decentralization. So the moment it comes to medieval, so the first thing with respect to the polity, what you need to keep in mind, that the polity in this medieval period is about the decentralized polity, where the powers were not completely concentrated in the hands of king. Rather, it is distributed among some other people also, and this is how it's a decentralized polity. That is one important feature, right? When it comes to the economy, now what changes could be noticed in the economy? When it comes to this, what kind of changes could be noticed in the economy basically?
So trade-related factors.
Trade?
Trade-related factors.
Trade तो हर phase में होता है. Economy? क्यों आपको लगता है कि इकोनॉमी इंक्रीज हो जानी चाहिए ऐसे पीरियड में? फ्यूडलिज्म कैसी इकोनॉमी को प्रमोट करता है? ये एक बहुत ओपन इकोनॉमी को प्रमोट करता है या क्लोज्ड इकोनॉमी को प्रमोट करता है? क्लोज्ड इकोनॉमी को रिप्रेजेंट करता है, ठीक है? तो फ्यूडलिज्म मतलब इट शुड बी टेकन इन दिस वे कि इट्स नॉट नेसेसरी दैट इकोनॉमी इज वेरी मच फ्लरिशिंग. Rather we can say it is a kind of system which is confining the economy, and in fact that whole idea of closed economy appears hereafter. Then when you started talking about a very closed economy which is not having like great amount of interaction with the other other cultures, and then we can say other countries also, other regions also. So it is indicating towards a kind of specific economy. And what kind of economy it is? As I told you, that it's a closed economy which is discussed about it. So if any economy is basically a closed economy, in that case undoubtedly it does not permit for great amount of trade and commerce, the way you have studied in ancient India. When you are studying like ancient India, we in every topic we kept on discussing about what? The trading relationship, right? That it was having trade, internal trade, then the external trade. but like unfortunately this phenomena could not be noticed, right? So then when it comes to society, of course the kind of polity and the economy we see, it was having a greater impact even over the society. And what kind of impact could be noticed over the society? If the polity is very decentralized, and that decentralized gets a kind of local power which is enjoying greater amount of power. On the other hand, it is not allowing the society to go for greater amount of commercial interaction, or let's say exchanges, which somehow stops or creates a hurdle for getting the new ideas and the new ideas, new concept, new discoveries and so on. And that's how in this particular period it was also imagined that the society to a certain extent also becomes what? Stagnant society. ठीक है, वो society कैसी होती है? बहुत progressive society नहीं होती है. So we can say कि when it comes to society, we can say that this society is basically a less progressive society. It is not having greater amount of interaction, right? So that's one thing. And then it comes to religious. So whenever you do talk about the stagnant society, or let's say kind of stagnant society, or let's say kind of non-progressive society, in that case you can say that in such society the religion becomes more dominant in the society. ठीक है, जाहिर सी बात है जो सोसाइटी बहुत लेस प्रोग्रेसिव होगी वहाँ पे रिलीजियस आइडियाज़ जो है अनडाउटेडली क्या करेंगी? बहुत डोमिनेट करेंगी. तो इस सोसाइटी में भी हम मान के चलते हैं कि रिलीजन कैसा रोल प्ले करेगा? इन्फ्लुएंशियल रोल प्ले करेगा या बहुत जो है डोमिनेटिंग रोल प्ले करेगा. तो इट्स नॉर्मली इन द मिडिवल सोसाइटी यू डू टॉक अबाउट ए ग्रेटर रोल ऑफ रिलीजन, राइट? Then it comes to like culture. Of course, like since I have told you that it's a less progressive society, and since it is a less progressive society, and that's how in the culture also you'll find a stagnancy is there, right? And in fact you do not, let's say you do not find the greater impacts of the other cultures, such as like when you studied ancient India, like we kept on studying about the outer influences. ठीक है, Greeks आ रहे हैं या Romans आ रहे हैं या फिर कोई भी और आ रहा है, ठीक है, उनके impacts यहाँ पे हम देखते हैं. तो cultural impacts भी जो है देखने को मिलता है. But if you'll go for an ideal feudal society, so normally it's not having greater like it's not having a kind of greater influence of the other societies. That's how the culture used to be. So basically, if it comes to medievalism as a whole, these are certain features of medievalism. That's one thing that you have to keep in mind. So when it comes to calling Indian, calling basically that period of India from 700, 750 to let's say 1800, whether it should be kept in medieval or not, that's a very important question. Earlier what happened, I'll tell you one more thing that's very important to understand, understand. When it comes to the medieval in India, the timeline, ठीक है, sorry, when it comes to medieval India, if we'll go for the early studies of history, ठीक है, the early studies of history, early studies. As per this early studies, first of all, you understand that this kind of timeline was not there for Indian history. Was it there? Like the periodization of Indian history was done in a very different way. There was one period which was called as Hindu period, which you know as ancient right now. Then the next period was called as Muslim period, and then the next one is called as the British period. So there was a very different kind of periodization was done of Indian history. But then this periodization was changed later on by whom? By Indian scholars, and that's how they are getting a new concept. Okay? Now they have also divided the Indian history in the category of ancient, medieval and modern. But when it comes to the understanding them in terms of time, I must tell you that ancient was believed to be from the beginning of, let's say, Harappan civilization, and it goes up to post-Gupta period. So that was the period which was considered as ancient period. But then what was the period timeline for the medieval? It started from 1200 AD and it goes up to 1800, right? And then finally the modern, after 1800 it was called as modern period. So when you go for this kind of timeline, what happened to the period which is known as a period between 750 to 1200? So I must tell you that when it comes to the early studies of Indian history, and in fact this particular feature was dominating in Indian history till 1990s, where there was no much focus was paid to the history of early medieval. ठीक है, early medieval को पढ़ते ही नहीं थे. Early medieval को क्या पढ़ना है यार? क्यों वक्त जाया करना है early medieval को पढ़ के? टाइम खराब है? नहीं. अर्ली मेडिवल को पढ़ के वक्त खराब करना था, क्या पढ़े हम, यही पूछते थे. दिस वॉज द क्वेश्चन विच वॉज बीइंग आस्क्ड बाय हिस्टोरियंस. अरे मुझे हो तो नथुलाल की तरह वरना ना हो, ठीक है. तो इस पीरियड में क्या है, कोई बड़ा राजा भी नहीं है, ठीक है. कैसे राजा, चंद्रगुप्त मौर्य की तरह, अशोक की तरह, ठीक है, या अकबर की तरह. देयर वाज नो सच रूलर. छोटे छोटे राजा हैं, छोटी छोटी जगह पे जो है उछल कूद मचा रहे हैं, आपस में लड़ लेते हैं, ठीक है. दिस इज द होल सिनेरियो. सो बेसिकली इट वाज बिलीव्ड कि देयर इज नथिंग एज सच टू बी स्टडीड इन द अर्ली मेडिवल पीरियड, एंड दैट्स हाउ फॉर अ वेरी लॉन्ग पीरियड ऑफ टाइम इट वाज कंसिडर्ड एज अ डार्क एज ऑफ इंडियन हिस्ट्री, दैट देयर इज नथिंग वेरी प्रोग्रेसिव इन द सोसाइटी, एंड दैट्स हाउ इट वाज बीइंग कॉल्ड एज डार्क एज. ठीक है, अंधेरा वाला पीरियड कहा गया है इसको, कि इसमें कुछ नहीं है पढ़ने लायक. एंड दैट्स व्हाई आई एम टेलिंग यू दैट लाइक बिफोर a proper construction of early medieval India, nobody bothered for this early medieval India. So ancient was from the Harappan times to the Gupta times, medieval from the Sultanate to the Mughal was the medieval times, and then 18th century onwards it was considered as the modern period. But in the last couple of decades, there is a reconstruction of the early medieval Indian history, and in fact this whole reconstruction was based on what? Discarding that what theory? Feudal theory. But again, I am trying to simplify it. It's not that simple. Basically what happened, the Marxist scholars are coming and they started saying, look, I say, like you can't say that the whole early medieval period was useless. There's nothing to be studied in the early medieval period. They said, yaar, this is also very important, early medieval period. Why the early medieval was found important by them? Because as per them, the feudalism was very much present in India also, and since the feudalism was present in India, this is the reason because of what feudalism is important in India. That's how it should be kept in the medieval period. So the whole concept of the medievalism got changed in India, and the medievalism what we started with the Sultanate period, we changed it and we started studying the early medieval from which period? Early medieval period, or let's say 7th century or 8th century. So that's how the rectification was done. But then a counter theory is also coming, which is saying that there was no feudalism in India. वो कहते हैं नहीं मानते कि इंडिया में फ्यूडलिज्म है, लेकिन ऐसा इसका मतलब ये नहीं. कई बार आप इसको ऐसे समझते हैं कि अच्छा अगर किसी ने आके ये कह दिया कि फ्यूडलिज्म इंडिया में नहीं है, इसका मतलब प्रूव हो गया, हेंस इट इज प्रूव दैट देयर वाज नो फ्यूडलिज्म इन इंडिया, एंड दैट्स हाउ वी वोंट बी टॉकिंग अबाउट feudalism. But the situation is not like that. Of course, there are some people still believe that feudalism is there, okay? And there are some people they believe that there was no feudalism in India. But then it creates some complications. Those who believe that feudalism was there in India, for them, early medieval period is falling in which period? Medieval. And those who do not believe that feudalism was there in India, the early medieval is falling in ancient. Got the point? So that whole debate is there. And in fact, अगर आपने रिसेंटली जो किताबें आई हैं 2005-6 के बाद या 2000 के बाद भी, आप उसमें देखते हैं कि एंशिएंट का सिलेबस जो है वो एक्सटेंड कर दिया गया है. अब एंशिएंट जो है अर्ली मिडीवल पे जाके ख़त्म होता है, तो ये एक बहुत बड़ा चेंज है. ठीक है, तो जब आप मिडीवल कहते हैं तो सीधा कूद मत जाइए सिलेबस में कि अच्छा ये कंटेंट है अभी पढ़ना है. ठीक है, आप समझिए कि ब्रॉडर डायमेंशंस क्या हैं इसके. सो ये जो अर्ली मेडिवल का पीरियड है जहाँ से शुरू होती है चीज़ें, वो बहुत कॉम्प्लिकेटेड है. ठीक है, तो यहाँ पे एक बैलेंस हमें बनाना पड़ता है, एंड वी हैव टू अंडरस्टैंड इट विद रिस्पेक्ट टू दिस बैलेंस, बिकॉज इफ यू अंडरस्टैंड दीज काइंड ऑफ थिंग्स देन ओनली विल बी एबल टू अंडरस्टैंड कि अच्छा दीज आर द थिंग्स विच कुड बी नोटिस इन द मेडिवल पीरियड, एंड देन दीज आर द थिंग्स विच कुड बी नोटिस इन द अर्ली मेडिवल पीरियड. सो दैट सिस्टम वाज that kind of understanding should be there. But whatever I had been discussing just now, can you understand one thing out of that? कि initially the early medieval period was not very important for you. Do you really believe कि early medieval is still not very important for you? नहीं. Now early medieval is important. Of course, there are some greater works have been done, but apart from these works, there are some other things also you have to keep in mind. कि now the importance of early medieval has been changed drastically, and we have started understanding early medieval with respect to the changes which are happening. So when you talk about Indian medieval, which is still considered to be somewhere between 1200 or let's say from 10th century to 18th century, now it is believed that the medieval of India to a greater extent was saved by which period? Early medieval period. तो ऐसा कुछ नहीं है कि एक नई इंस्टीट्यूशन आ गई और उसने इंडिया को बदल दिया. वो इंस्टीट्यूशन था या नहीं था वो सब्जेक्टिव है, तो हमें वो दोनों ही पॉसिबिलिटीज को रख के चलना पड़ेगा. द रीजन बिकॉज ऑफ व्हाट आई हैड बीन टेलिंग यू दैट ओके द फर्स्ट थिंग दैट फ्यूडलिज्म वाज प्रेजेंट इन इंडिया और नॉट इज डिबेटेबल. Even though if feudalism was present in India, it was a different period. and even though feudalism was not present in India, again changes were तो there ना. अंडरस्टूड माई पॉइंट और नॉट. ऐसा थोड़ी कि अर्ली मेडिवल में जो चेंजेस हैं हम उसको डिस्कार्ड कर सकते हैं, जो चेंजेस हैं वो हैं, ठीक है. तो इसका मतलब अगर फ्यूडलिज्म है तो इन दैट केस विल बी एबल टू एनालाइज दोज चेंजेस विद रेस्पेक्ट टू फ्यूडलिज्म. इफ इट इज नॉट देयर, इन दैट केस वी हैव टू अंडरस्टैंड द सेम थिंग इन अ डिफरेंट वे. So undoubtedly this early medieval period, whether it is part of medieval or ancient, that may be a subject to debate, but undoubtedly early medieval has played very important role for for bringing the medievalism in India, or let's say for bringing this medieval period in India. So that would be the best way of understanding the whole syllabus, so that you have to keep in mind, right? So थोड़ा ये सारी चीजें जो है रखनी. फिर उसके आगे क्या होता है, उसके आगे then you find the coming of Muslims in this country. But then sometimes what has happened, the coming of Muslims is something which has been overhyped. It is always believed that Muslims have come to this country and then they started a different kind of rule. So probably this was considered as a landmark for Indian history, and that was another reason because of what it was considered as a separate period. That's the whole idea. मतलब ये नहीं देखते थे कि whether some structural changes were there in the society or not. Since the Muslim are coming and they establish a Muslim rule, and that's how it should be considered as a different period. That's the next idea. But then with the coming of Muslims, nothing's are changing. And in fact, most importantly, you all should understand one thing, that in Indian history you can find that people from outside kept on coming, and the way they were integrated into the society, that was not a kind of new phenomena in Indian history. Like you have seen the Greek people were coming, okay? So Indo-Greeks, or let's say Greek people were coming. After the Greek people, you have seen the Sakas are coming, then Kusanas are coming, then Hunas are coming, right? And then you see the Muslims are coming. So you have seen that the outer communities kept on coming to India, and of course sometimes they had been playing very important role. That's one thing. And the second thing, there was no period can be called as a Muslim period, or a period even where the Muslims have dominated. Why it's so? Because there was no as such period where the whole India was being ruled only by the Muslims. That's one thing. And the second thing that you have to keep in mind, that the subject which were being ruled by some rulers, like they were largely not Muslims, and that's why you can't call it a Muslim period. So you need to change your approach for this period, and that's how you have to understand it. Like you all know that in the recent times there is much debate going on, and in fact the kind of new things which are happening in academics basically, कि medieval को हटा देंगे या औरंगजेब का chapter हटा दिया, ये सारी चीज़ें चल रही है. और ये सारी चीज़ें भी आपके लिए बहुत important बनती है, क्योंकि जब आपके टाइम पे या आपके समय पे ऐसी सारी चीज़ें हो रही है, तो आपके लिए आपको भी ये समझना पड़ेगा कि हमें कैसे जस्टिस करना है उन चीज़ों के साथ. क्योंकि एक तरफ गवर्नमेंट इज हैविंग ए वेरी डिफरेंट अप्रोच टुवर्ड्स इट, बट देन इट इज देयर स्टिल इन योर सिलेबस. सो हाउ टू डू द जस्टिफिकेशन विद दीज काइंड ऑफ थिंग, दैट बिकम्स एन अनदर क्वेश्चन फॉर यू. एंड दैट्स वाई डोंट टेक दिस मेडिवल इन दिस वे कि अच्छा इसमें कुछ कंटेंट है, अकबर पढ़ना है, अलाउद्दीन खिलजी पढ़ना, पढ़ डालेंगे, बात खत्म है, ठीक है. तो ये जो हथौड़ा मार अप्रोच है वो नहीं चलेगा. अगर आपको स्कोर अच्छा करना है तो थोड़ा सा जो है नज़ाकत चाहिए, ठीक है. तो नज़ाकत के लिए थोड़ा PYQs का एनालिसिस करना है, और थोड़ा उनको सिलेबस के साथ सिंक्रोनाइज करना है. ये दो चीज़ें करनी है जो हम आज की क्लास में करने वाले हैं, ठीक है. ओके, फाइन. सो नाउ वी आर जस्ट कमिंग टू द सिलेबस. दिस इज़ द फर्स्ट टॉपिक, अर्ली मिडीवल इंडिया. अब यहाँ पे मैं एक चीज़ आपको बहुत कैटेगोरिकली बता दूँ, आप लोगों ने कितना माइन्यूटली इसको ऑब्जर्व किया है नहीं किया है वो आपकी प्रॉब्लम है, ठीक है. मैं अपने एंड से बता देता हूँ आपको. आपने एक चीज़ नोटिस किया कि कुछ क्वेश्चन अर्ली मिडीवल से एंशिएंट में पूछते हैं, और कुछ क्वेश्चन ये लोग मिडीवल में पूछते हैं. वो डिवीज़न कैसे करते हैं ये लोग, क्यों ये कन्फ्यूज़न है, ये तो मैंने बताया आपको, ठीक है. ये कन्फ्यूज़न क्यों आता है, ये कन्फ्यूज़न था नहीं पहले, ये कन्फ्यूज़न थोड़ा बाद में आया है. जब ये कन्फ्यूज़न आया है तो उसको लोग कैसे सेटल करते हैं. हम अब मान के चलते हैं कि फ्रॉम 10th century, ठीक है, you can find certain new features have started coming into India. So normally a pattern can be noticed कि the questions which are like the topics which are important before 10th century, they are being asked in ancient part, and the topics which are becoming important after 10th century, they are kept in the medieval. जैसे चोलास को लोग कहाँ रखते हैं, मिडीवल में रखते हैं, ठीक है. और जो है इस तरीके से वो लोग चेंजेस करते हैं। तो देखिए ये जो है अर्ली मेडिवल इंडिया, सो दे हैव कैटेगोरिकली रिटन हियर द चोलास एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन. सो दिस इज अ काइंड ऑफ ब्रॉडर डिवीजन दैट दे हैव क्रिएटेड इन ऑर्डर टू गेट अ काइंड ऑफ सिंप्लीफाइड like it's sort of simplified thing for themselves only and for you also. So that's how the syllabus was divided. So now for you the syllabus starting, the syllabus of early medieval India is starting from like from here. But yes, I must tell you here that as you all understand ki early medieval for a very long period of time was not important, and that's why the questions were not being asked in greater number. But then early medieval has really become very important, because if you have understood history little bit, in that case you all must be realizing one thing, that transition is the most important thing. And in fact, since early medieval is marking that transition in India, so in that particular regard we can say it becomes important. And you must have realized, like check out the questions, you'll find that gradually the importance of this portion is increasing in your syllabus, or sorry, in the UPSC questions. So that you need to keep in mind. So what is the first topic? Acha, one more thing. Sometimes you analyze the PYQs in such a way that the questions which have been asked previously, they are not important at all. Am I correct? नहीं क्यों भाई? जो क्वेश्चंस पूछे गए वो इम्पोर्टेंट है या नहीं है? तो आप एक ही फंडा फॉलो करते हैं, जो प्रीवियसली पूछा गया है, दे आर इम्पोर्टेंट. But then I think this is not sufficient for you. The questions that have been asked to you previously, it's not necessary that only they are important. Now UPSC is bringing the new dimensions also, and that's how not only you have to understand the that's how you're not supposed to utilize this PYQs in this way. Okay, this question has come, and that's the reason you need to prepare this topic only. You have to also assume, you have to also anticipate what are the new possibilities in the paper, and you need to prepare the syllabus as per that if you really want to score good. अगर आप वही लेना चाहते हैं 120, 115, तो फिर ठीक है, इतनी मशक्क़त करने की ज़रूरत नहीं है. लेकिन अगर आपको 150 प्लस जाना है पेपर में, तो फिर आपको ये समझना पड़ेगा कि कुछ नए डायमेंशंस भी हैं, एंड द न्यू डायमेंशंस आर इक्वली इंपॉर्टेंट, एंड दैट्स व्हाई इट शुड बी लाइक प्रॉपर्ली फोकस्ड बाय यू. What I believe that early medieval was not that too important, like was not that important initially, but now early medieval has become very important. Specifically, if you'll see the topics like in a polity, so the major developments in northern India and the peninsula, origin and the rise of Rajputas, then the Cholas are there, okay? Then the Cholas are there, then the agrarian economy and the urban settlements, trade and commerce, society, the condition of women, Indian science and technology. These are the various subtopics in this, right? So as I have classified them into various categories, so you can see that when it comes to the questions related to the origin of Cholas, right? So sorry, origin of the Rajputas, that question was asked last in 2001. So it's an important topic, but it was not asked. इसके पीछे बहुत सारे reasons हैं, मैं सारी चीज़ें इतना नहीं बता सकता इधर, ठीक है, कि उसके पीछे क्या reasons है, इसकी वजह से origin of Rajputas पे इन लोगों ने जो है पूछना बंद कर दिया है, क्योंकि जो theories हैं उसके पीछे, origin of Rajputas के पीछे, now these theories are very much questioned, and probably this is the reason because of what they have stopped the questions, but there are some other reasons also because of what they are not asking much question. Now this, like there comes to another very important topic, it's about the Cholas. But let me tell you one thing very frankly, that moment it comes to Cholas, earlier there was one dimension of the Chola which was asked most of the time, and that was about the local self-government. वो हर alternative year पे ये question आना था अगर आप पुराने syllabus को देखेंगे. अब ऐसा नहीं है, अब वो लोग चोलास के बहुत अलग अलग डायमेंशंस जो है हंट करना शुरू कर दिया उन लोगों ने. और लाइक लुक एट द क्वेश्चन, सो चोलास मैरीटाइम एक्सपेंशन, Chola's maritime expansion, of course, to the Southeast Asian countries. The Chola rulers basically administration, right? And then Cholas as builders. Okay? Then this is in 2016, there was a question on this Uttar Meru inscription, which is mostly talking about this local self-government. Otherwise, after 2006, like 16, after 2016, then you can 2009 they asked this question. So as I am telling you that earlier this question was being asked on every alternative years. Now this pattern could not be noticed. Rather, they have like started hunting the new areas. So basically, you can find that administration has become very important. That's one aspect. And apart from administration, I must say the cultural expansion under the Cholas had become very important. So administration and then of course the cultural expansion. So these are two important topics, and in fact the cultural expansion was asked like in 2011 also. So this has become very important. So administration and this the next thing is the cultural expansion. So that's how we can say different ideas have are being hunted. So that's how new questions are being framed. There was one more question, probably it's not here, I have missed the question or what. It was asking about the nature of Chola state. There was a question. I guess this question is missed. There was one question in 1 year that it was asked on nature of Chola state. So that's also very important dimension which is being asked. Then it comes to the next topic is Indian feudalism, right? So when it comes to Indian feudalism, you all understand that this debate is very important. So initially there was just feudalism, right? Now it is not feudalism, but it's a whole debate. So it's not about proving कि feudalism था, ठीक है? अभी क्या है? Feudalism था और कैसा था? अभी क्या है? Feudalism था या नहीं था? और अगर feudalism नहीं था तो उसका जो है alternative ideas क्या है जो वहाँ पे हम apply कर सकते हैं? And this is the reason because of what feudalism is always a very important topic. But I must tell you कि जितना important ये है, unfortunately उतना frequently question में नहीं आता है. But then you can see the question in 2021 they have asked, 2016 they have asked, 12 they have asked, 2019. So on some regular intervals they have been asking the questions on this feudalism. Okay. Moving next is about the agrarian economy and urban settlements. Now this is again a sort of new dimension. This question was asked in 2022, and then Brahmadeya land ownership in 2015, and then again 2014 the question was there, 2011 the question was there. So basically this has become very important, and over the period I am telling you that this point, this particular topic is going to be more and more important. Why? Because the researches have been done more in number for this particular period, and this is the reason it has become very important. And in fact this has become also important for this reason that whenever it comes to history, now instead of focusing more on the political dimension, we have started focusing more on the economic and the social dimensions. तो एक reason जिसकी वजह से important बनता है, और दूसरा क्या है, if you really wish to understand the society and economy in the medieval period, so you won't be able to do the justification with this until and unless you understand the social and economic developments during the early medieval period, and that's how this is an important dimension. Or you don't try to compare it with the number of questions which have been asked. I am telling you that over the period the number of questions are definitely going to increase from this part, as it has really become important. So maybe when it comes to Cholas, they are not going to ask every year a question from the Cholas. Maybe वो gap है वो शायद चलेगा, लेकिन यहाँ पे number of questions बढ़ेंगे, वो मैं categorically आपको बोल रहा हूँ, आपको ध्यान में रखना है, ठीक है? Okay, then moving to this trade and commerce. Earlier this monetary anemia, ठीक है, हर दूसरे तीसरे साल monetary anemia पे question आता था, specifically for the post Gupta period. Now the thing is that 2010 the last question was asked on this monetary anemia. Why? Because if you believe in the feudal theory, in that case the monetary anemia was doing the justification with it. ठीक है, वो सारी चीजें जो है एक साथ लिंक कर दी गई थी कि अच्छा feudalism है तो monetary anemia है, de-urbanization है, everything was linked together. Now once it is counter that whether the feudalism was there or not, and if feudalism was not there, in that case you can't accept the idea of de-urbanization. तो अगर डी अर्बनाइजेशन एक्सेप्ट नहीं कर सकते हैं तो आप मॉनेटरी एनीमी एक्सेप्ट नहीं कर सकते हैं. तो अगर ये सारी चीज़ें अगर फिट नहीं बैठ रही, पहले तो एक तार में या एक सूत्र में बंधे हुए थे, ठीक है, अब नहीं है वैसा. नाउ दे आर नॉट लाइक दैट. सो सिंस दे आर नॉट लाइक दैट, दिस इज द रीजन बिकॉज ऑफ व्हाट नाउ इट हैजंट बिकम दैट इंपॉर्टेंट. तो मुझे लगता है कि ठीक है, अभी आप थोड़ा पढ़ के भी काम चला सकते हैं, इसमें बहुत अंदर जाने की जरूरत नहीं है. ओके. Society. Again, there is very less number. 2018, the last question was noticed from society. And critically analyze the changing nature of caste and gender. ये तो भाई मतलब पूरे यूपीएससी के लिए इंपॉर्टेंट है, कास्ट और जेंडर, ठीक है. ये दो चीज़ें तो यूपीएससी मतलब इट्स नॉट नेसेसरी, इट्स इंपॉर्टेंट इन हिस्ट्री, इट्स इंपॉर्टेंट इन सोसाइटी, इट्स इंपॉर्टेंट इन ज्योग्राफी ऑल्सो. सो आप बहुत अलग अलग एरिया में, इट्स वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर इवन एसे. So it is very important. Of course it is important here also, and undoubtedly whenever the other changes you see in the society, let's say when you see the change in the economy, the economic structures, the agrarian relation, the urban relationship, so as per that the gender relation is also changing. So ये तो आना ही है, caste और gender. आप सही कह रहे हैं बिल्कुल. बट ब्रह्मदेय का जो नेचर है वो बहुत ड्रास्टिकली बदलता है कब, अर्ली मेडिवल पीरियड में। और यही वजह है कि ब्रह्मदयास का जो नेचर हुआ करता था पहले एंशिएंट टाइम्स में और ब्रह्मदया का जो नेचर है अर्ली मेडिवल पीरियड में, उसमें काफ़ी फ़र्क है। और उस बदले हुए नेचर की वजह से क्या होता है कि काफ़ी सारे इम्पैक्ट सोसाइटी में छोड़ता है। तो ब्रह्मदयास प्रोबेबली इतने इंपॉर्टेंट नहीं थे। जब सातवाहनास की बात कर सकते हैं या फिर आप जो है उसके लेटर पीरियड्स की बात करते हैं, उसमें ब्राह्मण्स को एक ज़मीन दे दी गई एंड दे वर गिवन द रेवेन्यू राइट्स ओवर इट सिंपली, right? But when the Brahmadeyas were like given in the early medieval period, not only the right over the revenue, but even the rights over the other like resources which are present over this land were also transferred simultaneously. That's the reason it had started leaving greater impact over the agrarian relation, over the caste structure of Indian society, over gender. You can find the impact of this. So Brahmadeyas are very important for integrating India, for let's say having like for restructuring the Indian society, then agrarian relation and so on. So Brahmadeyas like are becoming very important in early medieval period. And then one more thing that you should understand, we are capable of understanding the Brahmadeyas pretty well only after the presence of the copper plates. तो जब वो प्लेट्स आती हैं तो हमारी समझ जो है वो बेहतर होती है अर्ली मेडिवल पे या ब्रह्मदयास पे, उतनी बेहतर समझ हमें उस पीरियड में नहीं होती थी. सो एनी लैंड डोनेशन इज नॉट सिंपली द ब्रह्मदयास. दे मतलब इन विच पीरियड? अर्ली मेडिवल टू सम एक्सटेंट इट वाज देयर फॉर द सेटलमेंट. ठीक है, हम बात करेंगे उसके बारे में अर्ली मेडिवल में कि किस तरीके से ब्रह्मदयास कंट्रीब्यूट कर रहे हैं, तो ऐसे समझेंगे. ठीक है, ओके. Let's move to the next topic is the cultural tradition in India 750. अभी तक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट नहीं रहा है, पर आने वाले टाइम पे ये मैं बता रहा हूँ आपको बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट होने वाला है, क्योंकि इसमें सारी इंपॉर्टेंट चीज़ें हैं और अर्ली मेडिवल में पहले भी इसको बहुत तवज्जो नहीं दिया गया था. ठीक है, और लेकिन अब आने वाले टाइम पे इसकी काफ़ी इंपॉर्टेंस होने वाली है. When it comes to the cultural tradition right in India between 750 to between 750 to 1200. So what are the things which are included in syllabus? So the philosophies are there, but there are several things written over here, but I must tell you that for you the most important is Shankaracharya, and we can say the comparative study between the Shankaracharya and Ramanujacharya. बाकी चीज़ें छोड़ दीजिए, क्योंकि इसमें इतना पोटेंशियल है ही नहीं कि इसको जो है क्वेश्चन के बतौर हम फॉर्म कर सकते हैं. मतलब we are not able to frame it in form of question, and that's the reason because of what we don't need to bother a lot about them. Then it comes to religion. Again, in this particular period, there are some greater changes with respect to religion, and most importantly, I must say, that the Bhakti movement in southern India, that's one thing. The second thing, in eastern India, you some greater changes, such as in form of Tantrism and all. That's the another change. So basically, these two important developments are there. So of course, like here, instead of instead of preparing everything, simply what you need to prepare, I have already told you. Then it comes to literature. लिटरेचर में सबसे जो इम्पोर्टेंट हमारे लिए है वो है रीजनल लिटरेचर, तमिल लिटरेचर, एंड ऑफ कोर्स द कलहन एंड अलबिरूनी. ये पेट क्वेश्चंस है यूपीएससी के, तो इस पे तो हमें प्रिपेयर करना है. तो सिलेबस में जो हर कुछ लिखा हुआ है आपको प्रिपेयर नहीं करना होता, आपको आइडेंटिफाई करना होता है कि यहाँ से पॉसिबिलिटी है या नहीं. वेदर यू whether you really find the significance of that particular topic this much or not, then as per that only you need to prepare the topic. तो हर कुछ जो लिखा हुआ है सिलेबस में पढ़ने की जरूरत नहीं है, हमको आइडेंटिफाई करना है. एंड इफ योर अंडरस्टैंडिंग इज गुड of the subject, in that case you'll be able to identify कि पढ़ना है या नहीं पढ़ना है. Let's see the questions. अच्छा, okay, sorry, something I had been missing, art and culture. मुझे बताने की जरूरत नहीं है, important था, important है और important रहेगा. ठीक है, और इसकी importance over the period और बढ़ेगी. क्यों बढ़ेगी? कुछ चीज़ें understood भी हैं. ठीक है, तो बढ़ेंगी तो हमें प्रिपेयर करना है. और यहाँ पे सबसे डेंजरस टॉपिक मुझे ये लगता है, क्यों? क्योंकि वंस दे स्टार्ट जंपिंग इनटू दिस रीजनल फॉर्म्स, दैट बिकम्स वेरी कॉम्प्लिकेटेड फॉर यू. और कॉम्प्लिकेटेड किस लिए? ऐसा नहीं कि आप जनरल स्टडीज़ में नहीं पढ़ते, आप पढ़ते जनरल स्टडीज़ में रीजनल आर्ट फॉर्म्स, बट सवाल है जब हम यूपीएससी ऑप्शनल में अपने आंसर्स लिख रहे हैं, अगर वही सेम जनरल स्टडीज़ वाले कंटेंट हम अगर लिख के आएंगे, बात कहाँ से बनेगी? ठीक है, तो कुछ तो नया करना पड़ेगा. ठीक है, यू नीड टू डू समथिंग न्यू, समथिंग बेटर देन अदर्स, दैट यू कैन स्कोर गुड. दैट्स द रीज़न बिकॉज ऑफ व्हाट, इट इज़ अ वेरी चैलेंजिंग टॉपिक फॉर यू कि ये अच्छे से करना है और इसमें थोड़ा एक्स्ट्रा कंटेंट और थोड़ा एक्स्ट्रा कंसेप्ट भी. बिकॉज मंदिर को ऐसे नहीं समझ सकते कि एक शिखरा है, एक गर्भगृह है, एक प्रदक्षिणा पथ है. इट्स नॉट लाइक दैट. ठीक है, द मंदिर्स आर हैविंग और द टेम्पल्स वर हैविंग इकोनॉमिक सिग्निफिकेंस, सोशल सिग्निफिकेंस, इकोनॉमिक सिग्निफिकेंस, सारी सिग्निफिकेंस है. तो आई थिंक व्हेन यू आर राइटिंग द राइटिंग द आंसर्स इन ऑप्शनल, in GS it is fine that you are making a painting, right, or making a drawing, and you are saying ki this is the Bimana, this is the like Sikhara, this is the Garbhagriha, this is the Pradikshina Path, this is the Mandapa. बहुत मस्त आएगा एकदम, लिख वो फोटो बना के लिख के आए उधर. ऐसा लिख के आने से ऑप्शनल में बहुत अच्छे मार्क्स नहीं आएंगे. तो ऑप्शनल में थोड़ा एक्स्ट्रा पुश चाहिए और वो थोड़ा कंसेप्चुअल पुश चाहिए. तो ये एक चैलेंजिंग टॉपिक है. ठीक है, बहुत क्वेश्चंस नहीं पूछे अभी तक इन लोगों ने, पर आने वाले टाइम पे मैं बोल रहा हूँ ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट होने वाला है. Here I just told you Shankaracharya is the most important thing, and he should be there, like he should be treated as one of the most important subjects because he does have a greater contribution. I'm not saying positive or negative, that we'll try to justify later on, but he does have a contribution. So we'll later on try to evaluate that whether he is having a positive or negative contribution. But yes, it's very important. Then it comes to religion and the religion, or let's say various religious forms. I did tell you that only there are certain things which are important for you, but the Vaishnava movement as a whole we need to understand it. ठीक है, Vaishnava movement, of course it is important, but when you are trying to understand the Vaishnava movement, like the movement you have applied the term movement, ठीक है, it should be treated in a very different way. Understood the point or not? It's not something which is precisely related to religion. It's something, when you are calling it a movement, it is also very much related to society. So don't try to understand in this way ki there was a movement and there was certain ideologies, certain concepts, certain philosophies. That's what called as Vaishnava movement. No, it should be understood with respect to society, with respect to society, with respect to polity, and so on. So us tarike se samajhna. And most importantly, which is always linked together, it's about the literature. तो वो डायमेंशंस डिकोड करने होते हैं कि कहाँ पॉसिबिलिटी है. अगर आप किसी टॉपिक को पढ़ते समय अगर आपको पॉसिबिलिटी समझ में आ गई कि ओके दीज आर द 3 डायमेंशंस इन विच द क्वेश्चन कुड बी फ्रेम, आई थिंक द जॉब इज डन, राइट, जॉब इज प्रिसाइजली डन. वही समझना होता है जब हम सिलेबस को समझते हैं कि यहाँ इसकी पॉसिबिलिटी है या नहीं है, अगर है तो इसमें कितने डायमेंशंस है. दैट्स इट. Okay, Tantrism, I have already told you that this is an important topic that we have to cover. Literature over the period in medieval, in paper like part B, paper 1, over the period it has become very important. अभी तक उन लोगों ने उतने डायमेंशंस हंट नहीं किए हैं जितनी पॉसिबिलिटीज बनती है इस पार्ट से. एंड आई एम टेलिंग यू ऑनेस्टली देयर इज ग्रेट अमाउंट ऑफ पॉसिबिलिटी ऑफ क्वेश्चंस फ्रॉम हियर, बट नाउ दे हैव स्टार्टेड हंटिंग दीज डायमेंशंस. सो देयर आर सम ट्रेडिशनल टॉपिक्स. ठीक है, ये टॉपिक्स तो ऐसा है कि अगर आप उसमें गलती करके आते हैं तो इसका मतलब है गलती या कुछ अब अच्छे से नहीं लिख के आते हैं. सो आई थिंक अपने पैर पे खुद ही कुल्हाड़ी मारने जैसी बात है. सो these are the topics which are very popular, frequently being asked, and as I told you, there are 2 topics, Al-Biruni and Raj Tarangini. But when you know that any topic is repeatedly being asked to you, then what becomes your duty? Why not to collect some such kind of content that you can write a better answer? Yes or no? तो जब आपको पता है कि यहाँ से क्वेश्चंस आने हैं और बहुत फ्रिक्वेंटली आने हैं, तो ट्राई टू कलेक्ट सच कंटेंट कि इस तरीके से छोड़ मत दीजिए कि हाँ ठीक है नया जो कंटेंट है वो लिख देंगे. हमेशा थोड़ा बेहतर कंटेंट करिए. और बेहतर कंटेंट कैसे होते हैं, आप 2-4 सोर्सेज के नाम आपने लिख दिए, देन यू रोट द नेम ऑफ 1 or 2 historians, and that's how you made it better. So it's very simple way, and like you can in the initial time when you have been preparing the subject, this effort can help you to make your answers better. And वो जो आधे नंबर का फ़र्क है उसका भी बहुत impact होता है. So of course like in this part the same repeated questions are there. Then it comes to art and culture. Okay, art and culture. I did tell you that though you have seen the question in 17, right? You have seen the question in 17, then 15, then 15. Like there were 2 questions. Okay. Then you had a question in 2012. So questions are coming, but yes, there are possibilities of more questions. I have already discussed that the moment we are preparing this temple architecture, so that simplistic approach towards it can't help you, can't get you a greater number. Rather, if you are able to connect it with the various other dimensions of society, that will be quite helpful, right? So that's all about this early medieval India. Like that's how we need to prepare. And in fact, you have seen that how many new dimensions are being hunted by it. So we have to prepare it accordingly. Okay. Then it comes to the 13th century. Okay. So in 13th century, let's see first what are the things which are there in syllabus. So establishment of Delhi Sultanate, the Gurian invasion, the factors behind the Gurian success. This is one thing from where very frequently questions are being asked. Then the economy, social and cultural consequences, the foundation of Delhi Sultanate, early Turkish Sultanate. Then consolidation, that's a very important word because most of the questions will find around this word of consolidation. Okay, fine. So when you see the question, so when it comes to the Gurian invasions, so basically there is just one question that has been asked so far, and that question is कि what were the reasons for the defeat of Rajputas? Straightforward, ठीक है. अब उसको जितने तरीके से ट्विस्ट करके पीछे आपको लिखना वही है. अब यहाँ पे क्या है? इट्स अ डिबेट बेसिकली. नॉर्मली आप क्या लिखते हैं? अभी तक मैं देखता हूँ बच्चों को जो पुराने हो चुके हैं उनको भी मैं देखता हूँ, दे आर राइटिंग द रीजंस 1, 2, 3, 4. So I think if this question is asked to you repeatedly, in that case, you should write it with respect to historiography. कि क्या historians क्या different ideas suggest करते हैं, बस इतनी चीज़ ध्यान में रखनी है. But that's a question which is frequently being asked. Okay, then it comes to the this part we have done. Okay, foundation of Delhi Sultanate and early Turkish Sultanate. Okay, so here, like if we'll see the question, to what extent the caliphate was the source and sanction of the legal authority. So it's asking the role of caliphate. Okay, that's one question. And then what measures were initiated by the Sultanate for the, this is a very simple question, it's not very complicated. That's a good dimension that has been asked in 2017. ऐसे बहुत सारे questions possible है दिल्ली सल्तनत और मुगल्स के लिए, पता नहीं वो लोग पूछते नहीं हैं अभी तक, ठीक है. जैसे बहुत सारे ऐसे dimensions है, मतलब basically the nature of state is something which can be asked by them in multiple ways, but then they are not hunting these areas. So maybe we should be ready with this, these dimensions also. Then it comes to the most important word, that's consolidation. So when it comes to consolidation, you all know that there were two persons majorly contributed here, and these two persons were Iltutmish and Balban. वही सेम रिपीटेड कहानी आती है जो बार बार पूछती है. आप आइडेंटिफाई कर लीजिए, यहाँ पे कुछ भी नया नहीं मिलेगा आपको, ठीक है. द सेम थिंग विल फाइंड द ये आई मीन टू से इल्तुतमिश, देन बलबन, then contribution of Iltutmish, ठीक है, in consolidation, the like blood and iron policy of this person Balban, and the Mongol policy, right? These are the things. Now earlier also they used to ask a lot about this Chahalgani, but now again they have started asking about this Chahalgani. So that's one dimension that you have to prepare. Same questions are there, but again I'm saying whenever you find the same questions, you should change your approach towards these questions. That can give you an advantage over others that you need to keep in mind. Okay. So these are the questions which are there from this consolidation of Delhi Sultanate. Then it comes to 14th century. Again, very important topic, but again I should say the same repeated topics. What are the repeated topics? What are there in the syllabus? ठीक है, that's Khalji Revolution, Alauddin Khilji, Muhammad Tughlaq, Firuz Shah Tughlaq. ये चार हैं जो topics दिए हुए हैं. Khalji Revolution is a simple term, and in fact it's being asked to you on regular occasions. And when it comes to the Khilji Revolution, so basically you know the coming of the Khaljis is known as Khalji Revolution, and 2021, मतलब last to last year they have asked this question. Then the theory of kingship, this is what I had been discussing like some little earlier also. So theory of kingship is something which is very important, but again last it was asked in 2014. But yes, there is a possibility of like this question. And why these questions have become so important? आप लोग इतने समझदार हैं कि आप समझ सकते हैं. Theory of kingship, whether it was based on the idea of Islam or not, ठीक है, like rest you can understand. तो ये है, ये dimensions जो है वो important है और आने वाले time पे भी बहुत important रहेंगे. Here I would like to tell you something. Alauddin Khilji, undoubtedly his agrarian reform, his market reforms, and then his expansion. These are three dimensions. यार they are never going to ask the question on expansion. Political expansion में तो ऐसे भी question कभी नहीं पूछती है वो लोग, तो ऐसे भी नहीं पूछेंगे. तो हमें बहुत रट्टा नहीं मारना है. But हमें रट्टा नहीं मारना है, इसका ये मतलब नहीं कि we should not have a brief, even a brief idea of the places which were conquered by Alauddin Khilji. Because when you are writing your answer, at least these examples could justify the answer, and that's the reason because of what you should keep in mind कि अच्छा ये ठीक है. अब ये information आप कहीं से भी collect कर सकते हो, NCERT से पढ़ के एक बार रख लो और रफली एक बार दिमाग में रखो कि ये सारे रीजन्स है या टेरिटरीज है जो अलाउद्दीन खिलजी ने जीते थे, ठीक है. लेकिन उसके बाद जो ये है, जैसे मार्केट रेगुलेशन उसका हो गया, ठीक है, व्हेन इट कम्स टू मार्केट रेगुलेशन, अग्रेरियन रिफॉर्म्स, राइट, There are two things I would like to tell you. That first of all, they are being being asked with certain different dimensions also, right? They are trying to link it with the other things, and that's how some experiments, I'll say, they have started. UPSC people have started doing it. Experiments they have started doing with these topics, and for that you don't need to go, or you don't need to don't need to collect very different kind of information, or you need to collect information from very different books as such. It's not necessary, but हम अपने information को थोड़ा सा दूसरे dimension से करके will be able to cope up with this particular part. So yes, I'll say nothing extra preparation is required here. A normal preparation with by finding certain specific dimension may work for us. Again, मोहम्मद बिन तुगलक वही डायमेंशन है पुराने जो सदियों से 1000 साल से चला रहा है, ठीक है, वही डायमेंशन जो है यहाँ, कम ऑन, हाँ, मोहम्मद बिन तुगलक के ऊपर वही 1000 साल पुराने वाले डायमेंशन से अभी भी चले आ रहे हैं. उसमें कुछ नया नहीं करना है. मैंने बोला कि अगर आप कुछ नया करना चाहते हैं तो आप बिल्कुल कर सकते हैं, और वो बस एक बार करने की ज़रूरत है. जैसे सर्टन न्यू लेट्स से हिस्टोरियोग्राफी और सम कंटेम्प्रेरी हिस्टोरियंस, ऐसा करके आप थोड़ा अपने आंसर को बेहतर बना सकते हैं. तो मतलब ये बहुत जो है रिपीटेड डायमेंशंस है. फिरोज शाह तुगलक एकदम बेकार हो चुके हैं, बिल्कुल नहीं आते क्वेश्चन उस पर से, ठीक है. लास्ट क्वेश्चन वाज आस्क्ड ऑन 2000, ठीक है. तो ठीक है यार, थोड़ा सा जो क्वेश्चंस नहीं आते हमें क्या करना है, एक बार देख के रख लेना है कि फिरोज शाह तुगलक के ये सारे रिफॉर्म्स है, और वो रिफॉर्म्स याद रखने और कुछ नहीं करना है. सो बेसिकली इन दीज टॉपिक्स वी आर नॉट सपोज टू इन्वेस्ट मच ऑफ आवर टाइम. यस, इब्ने बतूता, दैट्स वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट टॉपिक. एंड ऐसे भी नाउ द सोर्सेस, व्हेन आई एम सेइंग sources it does not mean कि every source being used in the medieval times you need to prepare, but of course Al-Biruni is very important, then Ibn Battuta is very important, Barni is very important, Minhaj is very important. तो ये जो 4-5 सोर्सेज है वो आपको प्रिपेयर रखना चाहिए. इसमें कोई बहुत ऐसा ऑकवर्ड नहीं है. सो ऑफ कोर्स दिस इज इम्पॉर्टेंट, बट यहाँ पे थोड़े एक्सपेरिमेंट्स करते हैं. तो जो आप एक पैराग्राफ पढ़ के जा रहे हैं ना, कई बार कुछ लोग ऐसे सजेस्ट करते हैं आपको कि यार देखो हर टॉपिक के ऊपर एक पैराग्राफ की इन्फॉर्मेशन होनी चाहिए. ऐसे मार्केट में बहुत लोग मिलेंगे जो सजेस्ट करेंगे हर टॉपिक के ऊपर एक पैराग्राफ कर लो, हिस्ट्री में और कुछ नहीं करना, रट्टा मार के जाओ और लिख दो उसको. If this idea could have worked, I'm telling you that everybody could have scored in that case more than 300. But unfortunately, it is not happening. Why? Because they are hunting new dimensions. ठीक है, ऐसा नहीं है. अब यहाँ पे slavery के ऊपर पूछा है उसने कि इब्ने बतूता क्या कहता है. So then slavery, if you are just really collecting just one paragraph on Ibn Battuta, in that case, you'll be writing just 2 lines on slavery. So by writing 2 lines, you can't expect 60% marks. तो थोड़ा ऐसा नहीं है. अब जैसे ये सारे important authors हैं, तो उसके कुछ possible dimensions एक साथ करके रखने होते हैं कि अगर स्लेवरी पे पूछा तो क्या लिखेंगे, अगर जो थ्योरी ऑफ किंगशिप पे पूछ लिया तो फिर क्या लिखेंगे, सॉरी थ्योरी ऑफ किंगशिप पे लिखा तो क्या पूछेंगे. तो ऐसे 2-3 डायमेंशंस हम पहले से फिगर आउट करके रख सकते हैं, और ऐसा नहीं कि बर्नी उठा के वो कुछ भी पूछ देंगे. ऑफ कोर्स जो चीज़ें बात बर्नी ने की है वो उसी के ऊपर पूछेंगे, या जुडिशियल सिस्टम के ऊपर पूछ दिया. तो 2-3 डायमेंशन जिसके ऊपर जो है बर्नी मतलब विथ रेस्पेक्ट टू दिस द क्वेश्चंस कुड बी फ्रेम. सो वी हैव टू कीप इन माइंड लाइक दीज काइंड ऑफ थिंग्स. ओके, let's move to next chapter. That's about the society, culture, economy, and in the 13th and 14th century. For me, this is the most important topic. अभी तक आपने देखा है कि the political history was undoubtedly given some weightage as in मतलब their policies were being asked, the consolidation was being asked, but then in the coming future the society and economy, these 2 dimensions are going to become the most important thing. So whenever it comes to the society and economy, we have to prepare well. So basically when it comes to the society in 13th and 14th century, well of course the Sultanate period, so far you can find very less number of questions. And what questions are there? Let's see. The Muslim nobility, right? So the question on Muslim nobility, the social composition of the nobility, these are the dimensions which are being asked. But I'm categorically telling you that here there are great possibilities of the question. As I told you, the early medieval is that period which had marked several important social transitions or broad social transitions. And that's how by the time you reach to the early medieval period, there are some very important institutions present in the society, and whenever it comes to these institutions, you need to prepare well them So that you have to keep in mind. So society is very important. So you can't, like, though questions have been asked only from this like one dimension, but that does not mean that this is the only dimension like you'll be asked. There are possibilities here. There are multiple possibilities of questions, and you need to prepare it. Such as, I'm just giving you suggestions, such as, like, one question would be based on rural society. One question will be based on urban society, maybe based on urban society. Why so many questions were not being asked from these topics? The questions are not being asked for this reason. There was no much work on this, ठीक है? But पिछले 10-20 सालों में जो medieval societies है, उस पर काफ़ी काम हुआ है, और हमने वो सारे sources जो है hunt करने शुरू किए हैं. Have you heard of this मलफूजात literature? ठीक है? मलफूजात literature, ठीक है? मलफूजात सुना ही नहीं, नाम ही नहीं सुना है. अब सोचिए कितनी बड़ी गलती. इस पे क्वेश्चन भी पूछा है मलफूजात लिटरेचर पे, ठीक है? तो ऐसे लिटरेचर जो है, जैसे मैं क्या है बता देता हूँ. जैसे सूफीज़ के जो लिटरेचर है, ठीक है, वो जब सूफीज़ एक दूसरे सूफी से कोऑर्डिनेट करते थे, दिस वाज डन थ्रू लेटर्स. These letters were later on compiled in form of malfuzat, and these malfuzats are being used to study the society in the right times. और अब जो रिसर्च हो रहे हैं ना, उसमें जैसे मैंने आपको एंशिएंट में बताया कि एंशिएंट में जब आप रिसर्च करते हैं तो आप जैसे जातकास का यूज़ बहुत बढ़ गया है, ठीक है? अर्लियर जातकास वर नॉट बीइंग यूज्ड टू नॉट बीइंग यूज्ड एज सोर्सेज. Now Jatkas have become very important. In the same way, in the medieval period, you can find that these kind of, like, Khajain and then Malfuzat, these kind of literatures have really become very important. So अब क्या है, हम society के ऊपर we are in a condition to know better or more about society, and that's the reason because of what the questions pertaining to these are becoming important, that you need to keep in mind in society. Okay, when it comes to culture, like, this is another dimension which is always important. New architectural features, 2018 they have asked, ठीक है? There they have compared the economic measure introduced by the Sultanate rulers. Okay, now this is something which is wrongly placed here. इतना यहाँ पे आएगा नहीं है. Then technological and stylistic development in the architecture, that's also one question. So this is another dimension which is important. मैं पहले भी कह रहा हूँ कि ये dimensions सब आने वाले time पे बहुत important होंगे. In the same way, economy. When it comes to economy, like, you always try to understand this economy precisely with this urbanization. Why with urbanization? Because this is considered as the third urbanization in Indian history, and since it is the third urbanization in Indian history, and that's how you can see how many questions they have asked on the urbanization. So urban settlements, they have asked this question, and urbanization, they have asked the question, ठीक है? So that's how you can find that several questions were asked on urbanization. But then like, other questions are also there. Other questions like, state of agriculture. Here there is great possibility. पहले भी बहुत सारे question पूछे. अगर हम ऊपर से देखें, so they have asked in 2022 this question was there. 2020 they have asked the question. Then 2020 again they have, like, 2 questions were there. State of agriculture 2019. Then textile technology 2018. Non-agricultural production 2017. More or less you can find consecutive, like, in consecutive years the questions were being asked from economy. तो जब आप देख रहे हैं कि कोई टॉपिक कितना इंपॉर्टेंट है, तो फिर आप सिर्फ उस टॉपिक को तैयार नहीं करेंगे, you'll also try to prepare the various dimensions of this topic. Because as you can see, like, though it's easy to tell you that these questions are asked on economy, but then you can see that they are not being asked on just one dimension, rather they are being asked from multiple dimensions. And honestly tell me that how many of you really prepared this textile technology separately? We don't prepare it. We don't prepare it because हमें लगता है कि इतना important नहीं. तो अब हमें थोड़े dimensions hunt करने हैं, और ये undoubtedly economy जो है इस period का बहुत important है, तो वो हमें उस हिसाब से prepare करना है. Okay, this is one angle which has become, like, what to write. I think important is not the right term. I think I should write, very, very, very important. Every year you can find the questions on the literature of medieval period is being asked to you. हर साल पूछ रहे हो लोग, ठीक है? और हर साल पूछ रहे हो, वो नॉर्मल क्वेश्चन भी नहीं पूछ रहे. दे आर जस्ट, मतलब पता नहीं निकाल के लाते हैं कहीं से क्वेश्चन कि ये वाला इस बार पूछेंगे, एंड दे आर आस्किंग दीज काइंड ऑफ क्वेश्चंस, ठीक है? एंड फ्रैंकली स्पीकिंग, इफ यू आर रीडिंग ए नॉर्मल टेक्स्ट, ठीक है, लेट्स से यू आर रीडिंग सतीश चंद्रा, यू आर रीडिंग JL Mehta, you won't find even the content of these kind of questions, right? So the possibility of these questions, and why so, there are, in last couple of years, I must say 4 or 5 years, I have seen good number of pictures, like good number of books are published on this literature, then architecture also. तो जब इतनी किताबें नई पब्लिश होती हैं तो वो यूजुअली जाते तो स्कॉलर्स ही बनाने के लिए, प्रोफेसर्स ही जाते हैं, तो उनके दिमाग में, उनके जहन में बात होती है, तो वो लोग क्या करते हैं, उनको उठा के फिर क्वेश्चंस में फ्रेम करते हैं. तो इस वजह से यहाँ पे हमें बहुत कॉशियस होने की ज़रूरत है. और यहाँ पे मतलब दिस पार्ट्स नॉट ओनली शुड बी प्रिपेयर्ड, दिस पार्ट शुड बी प्रिपेयर्ड वेल and it should be treated properly. So this is a part which is very important for for us, right? Okay. Then we are entering into basically the next is 15th and early 16th century. Now when it comes to 15th and early 16th century, I must tell you it is mostly about the provincial dynasties. ठीक है, प्रोविंशियल डायनेस्टीज, बट इतना पैनिक नहीं करना प्रोविंशियल डायनेस्टीज को देख के, बिकॉज इन बिटवीन यू कैन फाइंड मेनी प्रोविंशियल डायनेस्टीज विद देयर, बहुत सारी है, बट ऑल द प्रोविंशियल डायनेस्टीज आर नॉट वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट टू अस, राइट. फॉर अस व्हाट आर इंपॉर्टेंट, लाइक आई मस्ट टेल यू दैट काश्मीर इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट टू अस, राइट. गुजरात तो हमेशा इंपॉर्टेंट है, ठीक है. देन मालवा, बहमनीज आर इंपॉर्टेंट टू अस, एंड देन विजयनगर इज इंपॉर्टेंट. ये 3 स्टेट्स है जो प्रिसाइसली वी हैव टू प्रिपेयर. The maximum possibility of the question is from where? विजयनगर. और इसके पीछे कई कारण हैं जिसकी वजह से विजयनगर ज़्यादा प्रोबेबल है. First reason and the historical reason because of what Vijayanagar is very important to us. So many travelers have visited Vijayanagar, and since good number of travelers have visited, so they have left their account for us, and that's how we are able to collect greater amount of information on Vijayanagar, and that's how the possibility is there to frame question. आप उस सोसाइटी पे भी पूछ रहे, इरिगेशन पे भी पूछ रहे उसके, ठीक है, उसकी इकोनॉमी पे पूछ रहे, उसके पॉलिटिकल थ्योरी या पॉलिटिकल प्रिंसिपल पे पूछ रहे, तो यहाँ पे बनती है पॉसिबिलिटीज, ठीक है. एंड इनफैक्ट बर्टन स्टीन की जो किताब है, या फिर जो है फॉरगटन एम्पायर हो गई, ठीक है, तो बहुत सारी किताबें भी लिखी गई इसके ऊपर से, जिसकी वजह से यहाँ पे काफ़ी पॉसिबिलिटीज है. बट इतनी पॉसिबिलिटीज कश्मीर में और बहमनीज में नहीं है. कश्मीर में ले दे के वही एक कहानी है पूछे जाने के लिए, जैनुल आबिदीन हो गए, ठीक है, तो जैनुल आबिदीन आपसे पूछेंगे. तो 2 चीज़ें हैं कश्मीर के लिए आपको याद रखना है, जैनुल आबिदीन एंड देन आर्किटेक्चर ऑफ कश्मीर, नथिंग एल्स. एक बार उन्होंने हालांकि लाल डेट भी आजमा लिया था, बट ठीक है, ऐसे बाउंसर्स आते रहते हैं, उस बाउंसर्स के लिए तैयार रहना है, थोड़ा सा दिल मजबूत करके यूपीएससी के एग्जाम में जाना है, ऐसे बाउंसर्स आते रहते हैं. ओके. लाल डेट नहीं, लाल डेट की बात कर रहा हूँ मैं. एक भक्ति सेंट थी कश्मीर से, जिनके ऊपर पूछा गया था एक बार, तो जब पूछा गया तो जो है लोग एकदम भौचक्के रह गए कि ये कहाँ से. लेकिन देखिए, जब भी कश्मीर हो गया या फिर लेट्स से अहोम किंगडम हो गए, इन पे ना टॉपिक प्रिपेयर होनी चाहिए. और ऐसे भी इस बार 2023 वाले में एक क्वेश्चन अहोम से आने वाला है, ठीक है, वो पक्का आएगा, 100% आएगा उसमें से. तो कुछ लॉजिक्स होते हैं उसके पीछे, तो आपको उसके according to that only you need to prepare certain topics. You have to be ready for these kind of topics. They are not very unusual. अब जैसे unusual क्या होता है, जैसे like as I told you once they have asked this question on लाल डेट. एक साल they asked the question on लेखा पद्धति. Like everybody has heard of लेखा पद्धति, but nobody was prepared to write a full-fledged answer on लेखा पद्धति. So ऐसे बाउंसर्स आते हैं, तो बाउंसर्स आते तो डक कर जाना चाहिए उसको, ठीक है. ऐसा नहीं कि जब हम ईगो पे ले लेके यार इसको तो लिखना ही है चाहे जो हो जाए, ठीक है, फ़ायदा नहीं है इसका कुछ. तो हमारे पास ऑप्शंस रहते हैं हमेशा. मालवा, बहमनी, लाइक ऑफ कोर्स बहमनी इज इंपॉर्टेंट, एंड देयर वर जस्ट कपल ऑफ डायमेंशंस इन बहमनी दैट दे कैन बी आस्क्ड स्पेसिफिकली व्हेन इट कम्स टू बहमनी, देयर कंट्रीब्यूशन इन एजुकेशन, द बहमनी सोसाइटी, दीज आर सर्टेन थिंग्स. विजयनगर, देयर आर n number of possibilities of the question from the Vijayanagar, and let us see some dimensions which are asked. So the conflict between Vijayanagar kingdom and the Bahmani kingdom, and it was asked with respect to the cultural factors, ठीक, कि इनके बीच में जो war है या जो struggle है, so the reasons responsible behind it were cultural reasons. मतलब they were asking indirectly about one being Hindu, one being Muslim, whether this was the main factor behind this struggle or not. This is what they had been asking. Once they asked this Amukta Malyad, and what was the relationship between the Fort Brahmin and between Fort Brahmin and the tribal groups, right? This question has been asked. So these are some new dimensions what they have started asking. And normally people do not prepare it. जैसे मेरे notes में आपको हमेशा मिलेगा कि मैंने बहुत शुरू से मैं ये वाला relation कराता आया हूँ, क्योंकि it's given in IGNU also, right? In IGNU material you'll find about it. Okay. Then the foreign travelers, I have already told you. Then apart from this foreign travelers, The political vacuum, again, it's about the origin, growth of Vijayanagar kingdom. So this basically origin पे पूछा है. The salient features of the polity, segmentary state model, right? So इसके बहुत सारे dimensions hunt किए गए हैं. So Vijayanagar is a very important topic for you, and in fact you all should prepare all the dynasties. ठीक है? Lodhis, ठीक है? क्यों exist करते हैं नहीं मालूम, ठीक है? But irony क्या है कि इन लोगों ने 2021 पे एक question पूछा है. Like they asked this question in 2021. 2021 पे they have asked one question. अब ठीक है यार, कभी उनका मर्जी होगा, कोई लोधी के सपोर्टर्स आ गए होंगे, ठीक है. हाँ. Then it comes to the next is Mughal Empire, ठीक है. Mughal Empire में there is very less possibility of the questions from Babur. Like 2021, they have asked the question, but then this question is very logical. Why? What were the reasons because of what Babur managed to defeat, the Lodhis? That's a simple question. Next question is very important, and in fact, you should be ready for these kind of questions. Though this question was asked in 2010, but then yes, it is important. I'm telling you that the theory of state or the nature of state is something which is important. Shershah Suri, again very important, but in last 10, 12 years, just one question can be noticed. That was asked in 2020, but that does not mean it is not important. I'll say that this is important, right? Portuguese colonial enterprises that you mostly study in modern. So if you do not focus much on these systems, rather you can, if you study only the relationship of Portuguese with the Mughals and all, so that would be sufficient. Next is the 15th and the early 16th century. So basically it is the period for, 15th and the early 16th century, it's precisely about society and culture. Society and culture. Again, this is important for you, right? Now, what are the subtopics which are there? That's regional culture, specificities, literary tradition, then provincial architecture, society, culture, literature, and arts in the Vijayanagar Empire. So I have already discussed that Vijayanagar period is important for us. So उसमें से तो हमेशा there is a possibility of question. So you have to prepare just like that particular part. Again, like the bouncer questions like Rana Kumbha as a patron of literature and art. Normally we are not prepared with such kind of topic. But ठीक है, there are a couple of such questions you may face very frequently. Then it comes to Akbar. Of course, when it comes to Akbar, not all the dimensions of Akbar are very important. Rather, I would like to say that when it comes to Akbar, normally his policies, right? So various policies drafted by Akbar is the most important aspect. So though he does have so many, so many successes with respect to the territorial conquest and all, but then they are not very important to us. Okay? What is important for us? That's basically the various systems, or basically we can say the various institutions which were established by him. So that brings Mansabdari system. Then we can talk about the Jagirdari system, then Dehsala system, then Rajput policy, then his religious policy, his Sulaykul policy. So whenever it comes to Akbar, always keep in mind his policies are very important, and you can see the question in 2022, then 2019, then 2014, 2011, just from Jagirdari and Mansabdari system. Okay? If Rajput policy 2021, 2017, they have asked question from here. Okay? When it comes to religious and social outlook, they have asked in 2018, then 2009 they have asked this question, 2015 also there was a question. So you can find more or less one question from Akbar, and that too from 3 of his policies, or his 4 policies, you can find one question. So you need to prepare well. And when you study the policies of Akbar, it should be prepared with respect to the historiography, right? Because the moment it comes to analysis, and whenever you have been giving analysis by your own, that's not very much valid. So whenever you have been giving this analysis, if you have been quoting certain historians, so then only it is having some weightage, otherwise there is no much importance of it. तो आपके marks भी बहुत general type के आएंगे, तो यहाँ पे आप अपने answers को थोड़े बेहतर कह सकते हो, right? Okay. Mughal Empire in the 17th century. Now here, it's not basically, there are so many topics which are here. Look at the topic, major administrative policies of Jahangir, Shahjahan and Aurangzeb. I think it's very clear that they are not very important. ठीक है, नहीं आते ज़्यादा question इसमें से. औरंगजेब के भी जो है उसके normally his policies were connected with the decline of the Mughal Empire. So his policies are connected with certain revolts which were taking place in the Mughal Empire, but not policies of Jahangir and Shahjahan. ये सारे important नहीं है. Then the religious policies of Jahangir and Shahjahan is there in the syllabus, but possibility is very less of the question to be asked from here. So इसको normally prepare करके रखना. Nature of Mughal state, it's an important topic, ठीक है. Then late 17th century crisis and the revolts. The Ahom kingdom, I have already told you that it is important. Shivaji is very important. शिवाजी को तो आप गलती से भी नहीं छोड़ सकते. Okay, so most of the questions you can find from where? You can find from the crises being faced by the Mughal Empire. So there are two important crises that we can talk about. In fact, three I can say: Jagirdari crisis, Mansabdari crisis, and the various revolts which were taking place. ये तीनों prepare करके रखना. यहाँ से questions आएंगे. और इसी तीनों dimensions से 2021, 13, and then 2009 they have asked the question. Our home kingdom, so far it's being asked only in 2014, but that does not mean कि the questions are not going to come. So though there are no much questions have been asked, but still I can say it is important to you and you should prepare well this particular topic. That's what I'll say. Then I told you Shivaji. Of course Shivaji is important. Okay. So you can see 2020, 2019. Okay. Then 2012 question was there. What is important for Shivaji? That now Shivaji is not being asked only with respect to the rivalry between the Shivaji and Mughals. Okay. Now Shivaji's other dimensions are being hunted. His administration, his Shivaji as a bureaucrat, Shivaji as a ruler, right? His Hindu Swaraj concept, okay? So that's how now Shivaji is being connected with various new dimensions, and that's how the way you had been, in fact, one more topic I didn't tell you, the origin of the rise of the Marathas. So yes, here there are possibilities also of the questions, and in fact, as per the possibilities, you need to prepare it. So they have asked, Shivaji with respect to the various sources available, Sabasat Bakar and Shiva Bharata. Then Shivaji was not merely military conqueror, but then enlightened ruler. So when you are calling him as enlightened ruler, so you need to justify it also, on what ground you have been calling him an enlightened ruler, enlightened ruler. Then Maratha movement, as I told you, the origin of the Marathas. Then the administrative and finance, which is being asked. So you can see that there are various new dimensions are being hunted. And then there is something which is called as miscellaneous. Actually, it's not miscellaneous. It's from the Mughal administration only, which is being asked. Okay. As usual, economy, society in the 16th and 17th century. ये कोई ना भी कहे तब भी important है. कोई कहे तो ठीक है. Right? Fine. So basically, when it comes to this part, now this part is, again I'm telling you, it's very important, right? Why it's important, because there are so many institutional changes could be noticed in India during this particular period. Either you say economy or else you say society, there are certain changes could be noticed, and probably whenever you find some institutional changes, they became important. So in the Mughal period it is happening. Like in economy, you can find that various new changes that could be noticed, and such as the new features, important features of agriculture. Of course, during this particular period, there are several changes which were there in the Mughal rural economy, or precisely Mughal agriculture, right? The rural economy is one important idea. 18 they have asked, 2015 they have asked. Then the medieval village society. Again, whenever it comes to the village society, if certain new institutions are coming, if certain, let's say, new systems are coming, so it is even having impact over the society. Now, as per them, the society is also taking a new shape. Like the class, basically, if I need to give one example, the intermediary section, it was already present in India, but then intermediary section somehow became very powerful during this Mughal period. So that's how these kind of topics are becoming very important. And in fact, the way, we are supposed to discuss about the, again, expansion, then technological changes, the new crops being, produced, how come it was changing the agrarian relation, like how come it was having the impact over the society also, and that's so there were so many dimensions which are there here, which are possible here, what you need to keep in mind. In the same way, when it comes to trade commerce, like that's another important dimension, and this, like, you know, you can find again the development in the trade and commerce, specifically with the presence of the European companies, you can find some greater changes. So not only the rural economy, but the urban economy was also greatly changing. And again, I'll say that because of this change in the urban economy, the urban society was also going through a change. तो यहाँ पे बहुत सारे पॉसिबिलिटीज़, अगर मुझे खुद क्वेश्चन बनाने के लिए बोला जाए तो मुझे लगता है बहुत सारे आइडियाज़ हैं जिस पे क्वेश्चन बनाए जा सकते हैं. तो जो लोग वहाँ पेपर बनाने के लिए बैठे हैं वो लोग और समझदार हैं, ठीक है. So of course they are having better knowledge. So of course they are having great amount of, you know, possibilities of, there are great amount of possibilities of the question. So look at the nature of the question. Trade and commerce in the Mughal Empire brought about the integration of the Indian subcontinent. Now 2022 this question was asked. So trade and commerce का मतलब ये मत पढ़ लेना कि India was having trade with Middle East countries, then Europe, and then Southeast Asian countries. क्या commodities है जिसका trade हो रहा है, ठीक है. So it's not about that. Trade मतलब like they are trying to you know, connect it with the various other things. It's talking about the integration of India. So that integration, the question is saying that this integration was not done by the Mughals politically. That integration is mainly done by the trading activities which are there. So these are hunting, these are getting into the core dimensions of the topic. The emergence of early capitalism. Look at this point. The emergence of early capitalism. Now this is something which is the, like, you know, kind of whole debate. There are some people that are saying that actually the modernity does not come in the middle of 18th century. The modernity has already come into India at least 1.5 century before. And this is the reason because of what they had been using this term, like, you know, early कैपिटलिज्म. सो अब हम मॉडर्न की जगह हम कुछ लोग एक दूसरा कंसेप्ट यूज़ करते हैं जिसको कहते हैं अर्ली मॉडर्न. एंड अर्ली मॉडर्न से कनेक्ट किसको करते हैं, कहते हैं कि पोर्चुगीज लाइक यूरोपियन कंपनीज के आने के बाद इंडिया हैज़ ऑलरेडी इंटर्ड इनटू ए काइंड ऑफ मॉडर्न फेज. सो यू कांट से मिडिल ऑफ 18th century, rather like 1.5 century before the modernity has come, and that's how it was connected to that, right? So you can understand कि now the dimensions of the questions are not the same dimensions which were being asked earlier. उसमें बहुत नए dimensions आ रहे हैं, तो थोड़ा conceptual clarity चाहिए यहाँ पे. ये तो आप वही लिख के आएंगे कि इंडिया का ट्रेड जो साउथ ईस्ट एशिया के साथ हो रहा है और उसमें जो है एक मसूदी लाल और एक दूसरे ट्रेडर जो है वो जाते हैं और ये सामान लेके जाते हैं और लेके आते हैं, इसके इस कंटेंट से काम नहीं चलेगा, थोड़ा आपको समझना पड़ेगा यहाँ पे. ओके, देन द कंडीशन ऑफ पेजेंट, आई फाइंड इट वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, राइट. अभी तक बहुत क्वेश्चंस नहीं पूछे गए हैं इससे, बट पूछेंगे. कंडीशन ऑफ वुमेन में मिडीवल पीरियड में काम अच्छा खासा है, मतलब लोगों ने आज बड़े बड़े स्कॉलर्स ने काफ़ी लिखा है कंडीशन ऑफ वुमेन. दो एनी सोर्स डज नॉट टॉक डायरेक्टली अबाउट देम, बट दे हैव कलेक्टेड वेरियस काइंड ऑफ सोर्सेज जिसमें पेंटिंग्स है और अलग अलग तरीके की चीज़ें हैं, और ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ दैट द कंडीशन ऑफ वुमेन हैज़ बीन रिटन. पोटेंशियल है बट पूछा नहीं गया है, और पोटेंशियल है तो आगे पूछेंगे, ठीक है, इसके लिए तैयार रखिएगा, ठीक है. एवोल्यूशन ऑफ द सिख कम्युनिटी नॉट वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट बट वी हैव टू प्रिपेयर, ठीक है. क्वेश्चंस आए हैं, 2021 में आया है, 17 में आया है, तो है इसमें भी पोटेंशियल है, और आने वाले टाइम पे इट्स गोइंग टू बी यू नो इम्पॉर्टेंट. देन इट कम्स टू कल्चर इन द मुगल एम्पायर. मैं ना भी कहूँ तो इम्पॉर्टेंट है. Cultures in the Mughal Empire. So again, literature and then various other dimensions basically. So it's about the, you know, Persian histories and other literature, Hindi, then Mughal architecture, painting, provincial architecture and painting, classical music, science and technology. आइडियनी देखिए कि अभी तक उन लोगों ने कभी म्यूजिक पे क्वेश्चन नहीं पूछा था, लास्ट ईयर वो भी पूछ लिया, ठीक है. तो यहाँ पे आपको परेशान कर रहे हैं वो, ठीक है. यहाँ पे डेफिनेटली दे हैव बीन creating problems, क्योंकि मैं पहले बताऊं, when earlier people used to prepare for UPSC with history optional, mostly they have targeted 3 questions from medieval and 2 questions from ancient. Why? Because they always felt that ancient questions are slightly tough, medieval questions are straightforward, ले लो, ठीक है. But now they are not asking the straightforward questions. In medieval also they have started doing much experiments, so a better preparation is required. म्यूजिक पे भी पूछने लगे, तो यहाँ पे ऑफ कोर्स पर्शियन लिटरेचर, संस्कृत लिटरेचर, राइट, लाइक ऑल दीज लिटरेचर्स आर बीइंग आस्क्ड. then Arabic and Persian historiography they have asked, Hindi literature they have asked, right. Architecture से of course there is great possibility of questions from the architecture, so they all are important. like and these are very important dimensions. Like this is the question I had been discussing. I have kept it in painting. मैं अलग से नहीं बनाना चाहता. हिंदुस्तानी classical music पे उन्होंने पूछा है last year only. Then Rajput School of Painting पे पूछा है. So that's how they are, मतलब they are hunting all the possible dimensions here. ठीक है. एक म्यूजिक छोड़ कर रखा था, मुझे लगता था कि चलो म्यूजिक और डांस ऑप्शनल में नहीं पूछते हैं, वो भ्रम भी तोड़ दिया इन लोगों ने और कहा कि नहीं कैसे नहीं पूछते, हम पूछेंगे. ठीक है, और उन्होंने पूछा ये क्वेश्चन यहाँ से. सो दैट्स हाउ वी कैन से कि क्वेश्चंस आर बीइंग आस्क्ड फ्रॉम ऑल दीज डायमेंशंस. And then finally it comes to the last topic, and that's about the 18th century. So when it comes to 18th century, like what are the topics here? Factors for the decline of the Mughal Empire, the regional principalities such as Nizam, then Bengal, Awadh, Maratha ascendancy under the Peshwas, the Maratha fiscal and financial system, emergence of the Afghan powers, Battle of Panipat, 1761, state of politics, कल्चर एंड इकोनॉमी ऑन द ईव ऑफ द ब्रिटिश कॉन्क्वेस्ट. ठीक है, इसमें कुछ डायमेंशंस है जो हमारे लिए इंपॉर्टेंट है. आई डोंट नो व्हाई, बट 18th century debate is an important topic, but they have an asked question. Like 2008 was the last year when directly they have asked the question, but they can ask on questions on the condition of economy and society in 18th century. This is a new dimension that can be asked to you, and be ready for this. So directly debate नहीं भी पूछेंगे कोई बात नहीं, but economy और society पे पूछेंगे. Then factors for the decline of the Mughal Empire, ये तो important question है और ये रहेगा. ठीक है, हिंदुस्तान जिंदाबाद है और रहेगा. ठीक है, मतलब regional principalities में like most of the time you can find the questions on Marathas, but then yes, like sometimes they have asked the other questions also, so that you prepare in actually modern times. When you read modern, all these regional principalities you prepare. So I think that's not something very unusual being asked, but then yes, this is important, and in fact as you have seen question 21, 16, 11, so on regular intervals they have been asking questions. Marathas are very important. So the rise of Maratha power in the 18th century, right? Then the Maratha policy of expansion they have asked. The Peshwas bureaucratic management, that's also asked. मतलब यहाँ पे भी हर possible dimension उन लोगों ने more or less पूछ ही लिया है, तो यहाँ पे वो पूछेंगे. Then Marathas fiscal and financial system is mostly about the Chauth and Sardeshmukhi. So yes, this is important. पूछना भी चाहिए उनको, यहाँ से पूछते हैं वो लोग. ठीक है. Then the Afghan power, it's not very important. Once 2012 they have asked a question, but I do not find it very important. State of politics, culture and economy of the on the eve of the British conquest. So in 2020 there was a question, critically evaluate history of 18th century India with reference to culture and economy. That's what I had been referring just now. Okay, now they can hunt these dimensions instead of asking directly the debate. Mostly in academics the debate is more important, rest of the things are less important, but now they have started hunting these dimensions. Okay, then at the end it comes to the Bhakti and Sufi movement, right? Yes, this is again I must say very important topic, and again I'll say don't prepare the Bhakti and Sufi movement with respect to the causes is responsible for the rise of Bhakti movement and Sufi movement, the nature of Bhakti movement and Sufi movement, and the disintegration or the decline of Bhakti movement. ठीक है, ऐसे नहीं पढ़ सकते हैं. Bhakti and Sufi movement, they are very important, and it should be prepared with respect to many dimensions. अब वो तो पूछेंगे, मैं इसमें सिर्फ बात कबीर की नहीं है. चलो सिर्फ कबीर के ऊपर पूछ लिया जाए तो इतना बचपन से कबीर के ऊपर पढ़ते हैं कि 2-4 लाइन तो लिख ही देंगे, लेकिन कुछ ऐसे डायमेंशन भी पूछे उन लोगों ने जो थोड़ा टफ है लिखना, तो इसको मल्टी डायमेंशनल अप्रोच चाहिए इन ऑर्डर टू प्रिपेयर इट. ठीक है, सो दैट्स हाउ वी कैन से कि दिस इज एन अनदर वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट टॉपिक व्हाट वी शुड प्रिपेयर. सो बेसिकली दीज आर द क्वेश्चन, एंड यू कैन सी द नंबर ऑफ क्वेश्चंस, and I have just included the question of last 10 years, but then see the number of questions, and in fact like that too in multiple dimensions. ठीक है, इंडियन रेनेसा कह सकते हैं, यानी लाल देद पे पूछा. देखो दिस इज द क्वेश्चन आई हैड बीन डिस्कसिंग, मलफूजात लिटरेचर, एंड दिस क्वेश्चन हैज बीन आस्क्ड. और कब पूछा? 2013 में पूछा ये वाला क्वेश्चन. तो ऐसे क्वेश्चंस जो है यहाँ से आएंगे, यू हैव टू बी रेडी. सो मोरल ऑफ द स्टोरी, ठीक है, मोरल ऑफ द स्टोरी इज वेरी सिंपली टू. देयर आर सर्टेन टॉपिक्स which are repeatedly being asked, right? So the questions which are repeatedly being asked, there are certain topics which are not important at all, leave them, or else we are just going to collect a minor information for them कि in case if any bouncer is coming तो थोड़ा कर देंगे इसको, है ना, नंबर निकल जाएगा उससे. But then there are certain questions which are repeatedly being asked. So the questions which are repeatedly being asked, that should be prepared pretty well. And in fact, you should try to collect some extra information that you can write your answer better than others. That's the one idea. Second, there are certain areas from where you do not find that the questions are very frequently being asked, but then they are important, right? And in fact, there are certain like topics from where multiple dimensions are being hunt. So basically, they are being asked. In that case, we have to prepare all these dimensions, and we'll try to understand that okay, these are the possible dimensions and some content on those possible dimensions. That's what you need to keep in mind. I have given you everything, okay? So you can analyze it from there also. That's all about this description, and that's how we'll be doing the ancient I have already done. You can watch it on the YouTube, and then we'll be doing for world and modern also. So thank you all. Thank you very much. Sorry, कल है